Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Traceability, Facts, Fictions, and the Future. My name is John Pollard. I'm Senior Director of Education for the International Gemological Institute, an educational advisor for PriceScope.com, and your host for PriceScope's In the Loop webinar series. I am joined today by PriceScope Diamond Concierge and Master Appraiser Dave Atlas, affectionately known as Old Miner by the PriceScope community, for his experienced comments and insight. Hi, Dave. Today's session involves diamonds and traceability in two parts. First, we'll discuss diamond sources, meaning where they come from, and how that's represented or not to the average consumer. I'm going to cover that topic in a format addressing where we are, how we got here, and where we're going. The second section will address diamond security and traceability, which is meaningful to jewelry enthusiasts who want peace of mind in the ownership and especially the wearing of their precious jewelry pieces. Throughout the session, we invite you to send in questions. We've scheduled time at the end to address them. You can send those questions in anytime. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start. We're going to talk about diamond sources and traceability first, beginning with natural diamonds. We're going to talk about where we are, how we got here, where we're going, and the principle of accelerating change. Now, before I get into this, we should stipulate that geopolitically, we have a current situation ongoing with Russia. Russia normally supplies a third of the world's rough diamonds. While that situation is certainly supported by the industry, the sanctions against Russian diamonds, what we're going to talk about today involves some history. So I will be mentioning history that has taken place in formerly the Soviet Union and then Russia, but let's go ahead and just put in a bubble the fact that overarching today's topic is a geopolitical situation with Russia that's not comfortable. So, where are we right now as it relates to traceability? First of all, conscious consumers today, they want to know what their money is going to support. They expect some sort of provenance, which essentially means where it came from, the chain of custody. So they're asking this question more and more about diamonds. And in the past, there has been some demand for this as well, and there have been targeted programs. There's a program called Pollard, and there's a program called Canada Mark, which basically says these diamonds come from Canada as the country of origin. There have also been some brands that specifically cited country of origin for their diamonds, but the process of aggregation in the diamond pipeline has largely prevented specific reporting. In addition to curiosity, there are consumer concerns. As we mentioned most recently, Russia, but of course in the late 1900s, there was the issue of conflict diamonds, which became rather severe. And we're going to talk about the measures that were taken to oppose conflict diamonds in a moment. But the reason I mention the topic right now is because that term, conflict diamonds, blood diamonds, it's being revived by overseas producers of lab-grown diamonds today as a way to cast a negative shadow and try to pull buyers to their product. Now, when it comes to the African continent today, the vast majority of natural diamonds benefit people and communities there in incredible ways. So, how did we get here? How did we get to a place where people are saying, where did the natural diamond that I'm buying come from? And for the most part, the answer is, well, we know it's probably from one of four places, but it's hard to get specific. Let's talk about conflict minerals because it's really the origin story of how we got to where we are today. Conflict minerals are places where people are poor but natural resources are rich, and so the poor people are exploited by those who are using them to fund, in many cases, insurgency. So tin, tungsten, gold, petroleum, rubber, there have been many conflict minerals in history. In fact, coltan, which is a component of whatever device you're using to watch this webinar, is currently a conflict mineral. The conflict diamond situation came into public consciousness in the 1990s. At the time, there were a number of countries in Africa which had insurgency occurring, and the rebels were forcing the locals to mine the diamonds and violating human rights. It's a real terrible story. And at one point, they estimated that up to 15% of global rough could potentially be touched by this situation. Obviously, that was a situation where something had to be done. Over the next 20 years, the diamond industry united with the United Nations and with governments of many countries to try and oppose the situation with conflict diamonds. At one point, approximately a decade later, Global Witness, which was an NGO that was especially on top of monitoring the situation, said that the conflict diamond situation had been reduced to something around 1% or less. Now, let's acknowledge something right away. If 1% of your family is in trouble, it's still a big problem. The diamond industry, those miners, the artisanal miners upstream, they're part of our family. And there are places such as Zimbabwe which are not under Kimberley jurisdiction, essentially, because it's a legitimate government that has problems going on. There's something like between 1% and 2% of rough diamonds come from Zimbabwe. It's a huge issue. And most of the natural diamond hubs in the world, Antwerp, Tel Aviv, New York among them, refuse to accept diamonds from Zimbabwe. In fact, many producers have, along with the Kimberley statement that they include, which says that the diamonds are Kimberley compliant and have followed a chain of custody to reach them before polishing, they're now including a non-Zimbabwe clause on their invoices to jewelers and to other sellers of diamonds. So there is still going to be, and it's a situation that's ongoing with many minerals, there's going to be that situation. But it's safe to say that because of what was done with agreements between miners and countries in Africa, several of those countries have been turned into Africa's most prosperous due to the stream of revenue that comes from natural diamond sales. Botswana is one of them. In fact, anyone who has watched my presentations on this topic before knows that I like to recommend it's a documentary, Fashionscapes documentary that's on YouTube. It's called Livia Firth and the Diamonds of Botswana. It's a fascinating look at what is happening in Botswana thanks to the natural resource diamonds and how it's being treated. A similar thing happened with the country of Namibia, and of course you have South Africa. So there's a lot of very positive things happening. And part of what happened is actually one of the reasons that it's very difficult to talk about country of origin. And that happened about 10 years ago when De Beers decided that they would move all of their sorting, distribution, and sales to Gaborone, the capital of Botswana. So now what happens is that all of De Beers diamonds, even the diamonds from Canada, the diamonds from Angola, Namibia, Botswana, all their mines get aggregated in Gaborone and they get sorted and classified into parcels for sale. And so in doing that, what's kind of nicknamed the Botswana mix, it used to be the London mix for the old school people in the audience before De Beers moved things into Botswana. Essentially, you have a Botswana mix, and they can't say, well, I can't tell you that this diamond actually came from the Northwest Territories in Canada or off the coast of Namibia. And that's just the way that diamonds have been aggregated, basically moving thousands of jobs into Southern Africa, which was intended to be a good thing, but it really has prevented specific origin reporting. There are some other reasons that origin reporting has not been done, but that's a biggie. So now that's kind of how we got here. And as it relates to origin reporting, again, Russian diamonds are an issue at present, but they were some of the first to start saying, well, this diamond comes from Archangel, and this diamond comes from the White Sea coast. meaning Alrosa, the Russian diamond distributor. So they were already doing this upstream, and many times diamond sellers could tell their customers where exactly in Russia those diamonds came from. So it's building. There's a great demand for traceability and reporting right now. And where we're going is a few viable solutions that have been innovated. Now, some people have said, what about blockchain? Can't you just blockchain the diamonds? You know, it's actually a reasonably simple thing to do. Yes and no. The problem with blockchain is that a polished diamond is absolutely unconnectable to a rough diamond unless you have some way of either marking or creating a record of the rough diamond beyond its surface. Once the rough diamond reaches the producer, it's sawed many times in 2, 3, 4 or more diamonds, and then it's girdled and polished, and it has no resemblance to the rough. So if you create a blockchain at the mine, that's all well and good, but you have to then create a completely new blockchain for the polished diamond. So this is, by the way, one of the reasons that the Kimberley process was the only practical solution, you know, essentially, which is a guarantee. It's a verbal guarantee. But consumers now are saying, look, you know, technology being what it is, there should be solutions. And the nice thing is we have 3 of them that are emerging. The first one, company Serene, that used to be Saren, and then they dropped an E on the end. So Serene has their diamond journey, and you can look this up. They have scanning, and in fact their technology is used by many producers to scan a rough diamond and see what the inclusions are, see what the graining is, discover strain inside the stone, and understand the best way to cut it. So their solution is to scan rough diamonds at the mine, upload those scans to a cloud, and then it doesn't matter how many hands the diamond changes, the producer who winds up with it and who's going to polish it, if they're subscribed to the program, they scan the diamond on their local machine, they can match it in the cloud, and you can create a chain there. So that's one technology that's been developed. I had the opportunity to sit with Wesley Tucker, who's a science expert working with De Beers on De Beers origin tracing. Their system is somewhat like Serene's. And in typical De Beers style, they're not going to say an awful lot about it because it's proprietary, but you can be sure that it is a scanning technology that will be efficient. And the positive thing for De Beers is that they're selling directly to site holders of choice. And so a site holder will be able to know where the stone came from. At present, my understanding is that De Beers will only be saying it is De Beers origin. They're not going to be talking about the different countries that they're active in. I think there'll probably be some pressure on them to actually give a country of origin, but at present, they will be able to say this is a De Beers origin diamond, comes from one of our mines. Now we can talk about the other solution, which is more of, I don't want to say it's invasive, I'll call it active rather than passive. And this is Alrosa, and they have developed nano etching, where if you have a rough diamond, it can be actually marked. It's an invisible marking that goes throughout the rough diamond. They do it in essentially, I don't have all the details, but the nano etching occurs in the rough diamond to the degree where once the diamond has been polished, you can still find those etchings and you can still connect the polished diamond back to the rough, basically like a QR code. So that's probably the most, for hardcore fans of this, that's probably the most satisfying solution, just because it is an active system. It's within the diamond and it's something that can't be removed. And it doesn't rely on a scan. It relies on you actually marking the stone. So those are the 3 approaches that are out there. There are others, of course, but these are the 3. If Alrosa and De Beers wind up providing solutions, that covers around 80% of all diamonds, maybe even a little bit more. So then it leaves the other 15 to 20% of miners to use one of those systems, either to adopt something like Serene or to work in tandem with one of the other miners and develop that system on their own. But ultimately, I believe that is where we're going. I think we'll have that at minimum. We'll be able to know miner of origin, and I think there will be increased pressure for country of origin. I'm going to jump to accelerating change, but before I do that, I wanted to ask Dave, essentially what we've been talking about here. Feel free to add anything I've left out or any other comments you'd like to make. Well, you might have to unmute yourself, sir.
Okay. It all makes sense, what you said. I know that there are just a lot of people that are not as concerned about origin, and they will continue to be sold stones that don't seem to have origin documents. Having done a lot of work in large chains over a period of time, and for independent jewelers, and for estate dealers especially, just things come and go, and you only own them for a few days at a time, or they come in on consignment to be sold in the stores. And if they have a document or a marking on them, it may be a feature for some people, which I think is great. But there's going to be plenty of merchandise over the next 10 or 15 years that's already in the pipeline in a way. And so much inventory is in the hands of individuals already that I think the majority of diamonds that are being sold for a long time will still be not blessed with origin. And I don't see it as a big negative for most people. Those that have that social conscience about where something comes from, they'll be able to satisfy that need. And that's great. And those that are more concerned about something that they just want to buy and get it over with, or they need to buy it because this is what the relationship calls for, they're just going to go out and buy something. And I don't know what size this is going to go down to. How small does it matter where it comes?
That's a good question. I'm glad you raised it. First of all, super helpful observation about the secondary market. I want to circle back on that. But you ask a great question. According to Mr. Tucker with De Beers, it will be 4 grainers and up, but that's rough. So we're probably talking about things that are above melee sizes. I would probably anything you'd get a dossier on is what I would hope. That's their plan. I don't have that information from Alrosa.
And of course, once stones are mounted, there may be just no way to determine if all the stones in a tennis bracelet are from this place, that place, another place. Will someone come along and say, "Oh, I have to have them all from the same mine"?
This is precisely though this, and so when during my earlier presentation, I mentioned there are some other reasons that country of origin specifically may not be stipulated, and it's exactly for what you're saying. If you open that door, then you may have a segment, especially if let's say that suddenly Namibia just becomes trending for whatever reason. Okay, now everybody's going to rush to the store and say, I want a tennis bracelet, but it has to all be diamonds from Namibia, you know. So there's some concern, I would say it's legitimate, about that. And at the same time, there has to be a solution which will satisfy the overarching question, what is my money going to support here? So the secondary market, Dave, I like to quote Martin Rappaport, who famously said some time ago, there are more diamonds in South Florida than there are in South Africa. So exactly right. There are heirloom pieces, and I know that pundits of staying completely carbon neutral or carbon positive are talking about using heirloom diamonds in recycled gold and things like this. You know, there are designers who are actually out working to do that in order to stay quote unquote green or what have you. Are you seeing more secondary market goods these days, or what's the trend basically according to you?
Well, I certainly saw my share of secondary market diamonds over the years I was in the estate jewelry business. Uh, I am a piece of that little chain of events that goes into looking at a lot of diamonds that are being sold as estate items online now. And I don't see anyone questioning the origin of these stones. They question the age because there are some modern ones being cut. Today, for the first time, I got a brochure from a company that is now selling old European cuts that are brand new, that are lab diamonds.
So there, yeah, and that's actually
Something I
I
hadn't
think that's
found a source for yet. So that's happening, and I expect that will go on.
That's super smart, by the way, because the antique look, especially as we go through the different lighting changes that we've evolved into, that antique look is becoming more and more popularized. Um, so I want to jump to accelerating change. I want to jump to where we're not just where we're going, but kind of looking at, I suppose, who's going to figure this out and who needs to figure it out. It's an interesting thing. Um, so with at the lab at IGI, we're having a number of lab-grown producers who are now saying we'd like to go ahead and add our country of origin. And for these producers, it's very simple. You know, you've got WD Diamonds in Washington, D.C. You've got growers in Oregon. You've got growers in a number of places in the U.S. And they want the USA as country of origin. Same thing's happening with some of the producers overseas. It's interesting that the natural diamond trade has essentially had a century of commerce or more, and this question has been sort of building. And now I think at the 11th hour, the miners are going to figure it out and are going to present solutions. It's interesting that some of the producers in the lab-grown industry figured this out very quickly and kind of beat the natural diamond industry to the punch. I don't want to exaggerate because the lab-grown market is still small compared to the natural market, and the segment of growers that is doing origin reporting is very small within that. So I don't want to exaggerate this. I just think there's some forward-thinking individuals there. It begs the question, how difficult is this going to be for the colored gemstone industry? We report country of origin for certain stones because we can decisively detect it. But then we have stones that are coming from all over the world that get aggregated and traded, and some are associated with countries where some not nice things are going on. Is there going to be an urgent call for colored gemstone origin reporting, do you think?
I don't see it. I see it, it could be on the distant horizon, but I don't see it as imminent because the colored stone business has never quite managed to get itself together quite in the way the diamond business is unified in certain respects. There's just a lot of irregularities between where stones come from and where they are said to come from. And it's become a business for certain laboratories around the world to try to conjure up where a stone originated based on its chemistry or its inclusions, its color, its fluorescence, all the little things that go into it. And it's a good business for them. Not that they're influential in making the decision about declaring countries of origin on a legal basis or a regulation basis. But you have the United States periodically banning rubies from Myanmar and then letting them in or letting some of them slip through the net by being what from somewhere else, and nobody knows for sure where. And I think that suits the eyewash appeal. It makes people comfortable, but I don't see it as being done on a consistent, legitimate basis. Not yet.
Yeah, the demand for it is there amongst a segment of that population and the collectors within that population in some cases. But you brought
Okay.
up another interesting point. You know, when you take a rough stone out of one country and you polish it in another country, then in terms of import law, it becomes a product of the country where it was polished. So, not to raise the specter of Russia too often during this session, but I will say that one of the big challenges right now is that most of the world's polishing is done in India. And so when polished diamonds come to the United States, they are a product of India. And the industry is working on stop gaps. And I'll tell you who's leading the charge, in fact. The brands, the iconic luxury brands, are really on top of this. It started with Melly buying. Um, our location, locations all over, but really specifically our location in Antwerp with IGI is involved in screening tens of millions of small goods for the purpose of screening lab grown out of natural. And we do this for many of the luxury brands. And by the way, for fans of the industry in the audience, I can tell you the news is really quite good. Out of 1 million stones screened, it's typical to find just 100 or a couple hundred that have been salted in that are not natural, which is really remarkable when you consider the amount of the many hands that can touch on this, and the fact that you've got some factories that are polishing both, et cetera, et cetera. So, circling back to gemstones, though, the colored gemstone working group was started by the luxury brands. You have Richemont and I think LVMH, Tiffany, which is now part of LVMH, but they were separate. They started this, it's called the CGWG, and anybody who's interested in learning more about colored gemstone, basically improving things for the artisanal miners and traceability, Colored Gemstone Working Group is indeed working on that. So as brands are really working to basically make sure that they're not salting any of their jewelry with anything that's lab grown, and are working to really avoid Russia at the present time, I think that if we see gemstones take off, it'll also be probably the brands that will spearhead that.
Yeah.
Before we get to part two, I did want to make a quick mention about the gold industry. Just recently, I've become more acutely aware of this. Mercury. Mercury is commonly used in small-scale gold mining, and it's something of a global health crisis. 20% of gold is mined by artisanal and small-scale miners. And there are some 20 million of those small-scale miners around the world, and most of them are using mercury in the process. And mercury is a very powerful neurotoxin. So this is, for me, this is really big. It's a little bit shocking, the numbers. If anybody is interested in learning more about this, I would encourage you to go to mercuryfreemining.org. Again, it's mercuryfreemining.org, to learn more about the campaign to protect those miners. The gentleman who started the campaign, I was on a panel with him at JCK recently. His name's Toby Pomeroy, but he's an authentic, just genuine, one of the good guys. He comes from a jeweler and design background, and now he's committed himself to this, and he's got the industry's attention. So anybody who's interested in learning more, mercuryfreemining.org. I'll try to drop that into the chat before we're finished here. Also, before we go on, may I just go ahead and shout out to our sponsors? These webinars are brought to you by PriceScope sponsors and supporters. For those joining us or watching for the first time, PriceScope is the world's largest diamond and jewelry community. There's over 100,000 registered members, and those members have been teaching consumers how to buy diamonds and jewelry for more than 20 years. The website attracts nearly 500,000 unique visitors per month, and the site aggregates and posts over 1 million diamonds from the world's most recognized, respected, and reputable vendors, including the world's most prominent online sellers. So in the resource section of the website, you can find a list there. I would encourage you to thank those vendors for making these webinars possible. And if you're not a member of the PriceScope community, I invite you to register today and join. It's a fun place. People talk about this stuff all the time. All right, moving on. Dave, this is gonna lean on you for this. Diamond security. Being able to basically own your diamond, and then if it's lost, being able to recover it. Could you walk us through just an A to Z on your thoughts?
Well, for what exists mostly today, one of the best ways to match up your diamond with a document is if the girdle is laser inscribed. That's a primary tool in being able to report a diamond is lost, and the fact that you could identify it if you just put a loop on it, it could read off the number. Now, there are ways for people to remove laser inscriptions. It's relatively easy to do, but I'm not going to talk about it. But it can be done very quickly within a minute or two. And it doesn't really do anything to the diamond except scratch it up a little bit. And that could be polished away. You'd never know that it was inscribed at all. However, people that are trading in these things don't tend to be that careful. They're in and out very quickly, and the diamond moves on to destination unknown. You should have good documentation. The days of buying anything meaningful in a diamond without any documentation are virtually over. When I started in the jewelry business in the late 60s, it was most common to buy a diamond that was on the word of whoever sold it to you. And it was rarely represented correctly, but it was often an honest representation of the best of the knowledge of the person that sold it. It wasn't necessarily dishonest, it was just uneducated. And it's become more and more and more common that employees and younger people that have come into the business have gone through the education process with GIA or the Gemological Association of Great Britain or one of the other ones around the world that are similar, to be really educated. And they know how to grade stones. It's not a major secret to come fairly close. Just like the labs don't always agree with one another, rarely would gemologists agree with one another exactly. Sometimes people that are members of my appraisal organization will insist that a stone has been graded wrong by a laboratory. And my large fear is that it's graded probably on the edge by a large laboratory, and the appraiser is just bullheaded enough to think that they're more right than a laboratory could be right. It's just opinion. However, if you have good documentation, the measurements should come out pretty well. I went up to the expense of getting a screw micrometer that has a torque setting on it so that I could measure the depth of diamonds from table to culet. And it's the only measurement on a diamond that should be able to be measured consistently. The girdle varies slightly from spot to spot along its edge, even if it's nearly perfectly cut. And you never know if you're exactly opposite on the furthest part of the diameter when you're measuring. But from culet to table, it's flat. You should be able to get an exact reading. And this tool measures out to the 4th decimal place, and it really is quite accurate. And virtually no diamond with anybody's lab report scans with that degree of accuracy. And so none of the reports read out to the fourth decimal point. And the truth is that their 2 decimal point readings tend to be high or low, depends on the weather, depends on the calibration date, whenever they did their last calibration. Even if they do it every morning when they open up, by the afternoon, things are not exactly the same. So you don't expect perfection. This isn't what it's all about. Probably the diamonds that have AGS 000 probably cut in a way that gives more precision, but the measurements from the laboratories are not as precise as the diamond itself has been cut. Very, very accurate. But that's really what you could do to identify a diamond. If you have the right weight, labs that report out to the third decimal with a good scale are going to give you an edge on exact weight. Labs that use 2-number grading, 2 decimal points, it's going to vary. Every once in a while, it'll be a few hundredths of a point different. It may not be 0.009. It may be 0.008 got pushed up.
That's actually going to be different if you measure it in Denver as opposed to Death Valley.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, it's super interesting. You know, I think it's difficult. I think in terms of okay, so when I identify a stone, and I've done appraisals, but I'm not an appraiser. I'm a specialist, but I'm certainly not doing this at the level of a professional appraiser. But it's interesting because I do like referencing the grading report, and I find it's useful. I try not to look at the grading report until after I've done my assessment because I don't want to have my opinion changed by what the grading report says. Color and clarity, I find sometimes almost impossible to use as a decisive indicator because we commonly say this, oh, a 1 grade subjective difference is acceptable. Of course, it's certainly not acceptable at the cash register. So I know we say that, and I think that in practice, it's true. A borderline VS2 SI1 can go one way with you, can go another way with me, could go a third way and a fourth way and a fifth way if we send it to 3 labs. Yeah. So it's interesting how the subjective things are not really precise. I mean, with certain inclusions, of course, if you have a stone that has a very distinctive inclusion, I think that's an awesome way to tell. In fact, my personal diamond that I wear has a very distinctive inclusion. It's actually hidden in the contrast pattern. But it's distinctive enough that I can identify my stone with a loop. What about gem print? And there's another reflective technology, I believe, called diamond dye that's coming out that's very similar. What do you think of those types of
Years ago, I owned a gem print machine. This is back in 1980, I think. I bought a gem print machine, maybe 1979. And I used it for a while, and it was an old-fashioned machine that used Polaroid film instead of a scanning, a sensor to take that photo.
Just for anyone who's not familiar, it's gem print is like fingerprint. Okay, it's a reflective technology. It uses light to create a pattern. The diamond creates a pattern. It's sort of like reverse ray tracing in a way. And so it creates a fingerprint. And so go ahead, David.
Yeah. And it used a red laser to create a fingerprint on the film at the time, but it's still using the same print now with a sensor, photo sensor. It supposedly would recognize a stone that had not been altered significantly, even if it was recut. I believe it works. But I don't know that it certainly didn't become the success I was hoping it would be. I thought it would be a universally acceptable process and was hoping to get in on the ground floor a little bit. And it became just kind of abandoned. It worked, but it just didn't have a market.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because that's the more for polished diamonds, and here again, as long as you don't alter the stone, It's the most decisive. In fact, they featured it in an episode of NCIS, the original NCIS, many years ago. So clearly, conceptually, it passes everybody's sniff test. But I'm also interested in puzzling out why perhaps it didn't get spread to more widespread use. Why it wasn't adopted in a much larger way.
Well, you had to make an investment in a machine for $3,500 back then, which was somewhat more than 3,500 today. Uh, it wasn't a costly gadget, and it was just people were not as tech driven. My business was not anything close to being computerized at that time. Uh, so it was just a different world. People were not tech happy. No one was asking for it. You had to sell it, and it wasn't practical. I did work on a project for Imagem for years that had a machine that would grade light return, and it made an image that was individual for each stone, very much like gem print. It didn't look like a gem print, but it made an individual image that was completely repeatable each time, and it combined measurements of a couple of proprietary things about a diamond automatically that would allow it to identify the same diamond over and over and over. No matter how you oriented it on the machine, it was self-centering. But no matter how you spun that diamond, it would recognize the diamond over again.
So there for polished stones, again, as long as it's not significantly altered, there are technologies out there
Yeah.
which, if I'm a consumer and I say, I want to have a record of this stone, there are technologies that exist. And by the way, I'm not at liberty to say who, but one of the larger lab-grown producers they have a similar technology. It's a reflective technology like what we're discussing.
Mhm.
They're going to start having it accompany their diamonds on the grading reports, in fact. So there is a desire, I think, for it. At present, what is the best thing that a consumer can provide to insurance? First of all, to ensure the best chance of like replacement, and second of all, is there a way? Um, what's the best reporting? I have an answer, but I'm interested in your answer. If you have a 3 carat D internally flawless diamond in a platinum setting and it's got a GIA inscription and it gets taken off the table, who would you report it to, and how would you make sure that your insurance company covered you correctly?
Well, hopefully you already have an existing appraisal, or you've insured it with the bill of sale from the purchase and given them a copy of the document so that they're cornered into giving you a replacement that's a like replacement, not just a diamond that weighs that much. And if you've done that, you're all right. You should be all right. All the major companies bend over backwards to satisfy claims. Uh, my belief is that insurance companies are making very good money on jewelry appraising or jewelry that's insured. But the vast majority of people that buy insurance are honest people, and the claims are not excessive. Uh, Otherwise, the rates would continue to go up and up and up as if you were in a flood zone and you want to keep rebuilding your house every time it flooded. Most people spend their whole life without making a claim. And so it's a profit center for insurance companies. The truth is they're very liberal about what they will allow you to do to get insurance. But if you've given them inadequate description, you're kind of stuck with an inadequate replacement.
Right,
So
right.
you have to corner them in advance. It's the same as buying secondhand jewelry. The only time you have a good opportunity to buy it is when you're kind of close to the original source, whoever sold it or the first dealer selling it. But if you pay too much, you're doomed. You could sell it, you could have it the rest of your life and never make a sale. If you pay too much, you're done. So You just have to cover yourself in advance. You can't wait till you have a loss to think you're going to have a good claim.
So I have 3 bullet points on that topic. That's excellent advice. I would say also with your insurance company, if you have something specialized, if you have a brand, if you bought through a brand, make sure that that's documented with insurance. If it is a stone that has something that goes beyond normal 4Cs reporting, if it's a Golconda stone, if it's cut, if it's a special cut, if it's a hearts and arrows cut, or if it's a specialty cut, make sure that that's all documented. Be aware, there is an article in the PriceScope education section about jewelry insurance. Be aware of what a actual replacement policy is versus a what I would call a okay, we're just going to basically match the basic 4Cs and not really get inside the details of what you had. As anybody who's been around PriceScope knows, what some places call an excellent cut has an awful lot of variability within it. And the same thing in terms of clarity. If you have an eye clean stone, I would have that documented with an appraisal. I would have that, if it's on the seller's documentation, have that documented as well. Otherwise, the next SI one that you get may not be the same class and category. So that's one thing. Really robust reporting with your insurance and being aware of what the insurance company is doing. Are they actually going to your jeweler, for example, or are they going to go to a buying organization that they work with? The second thing is, if you have that stone graded at a laboratory, if you have a laboratory report, you can actually call the laboratory and report that stone stolen. Every single lab will take that call and they will make that known. Not all crooks are dumb, but I will say there are those who are not sharp enough to realize that if they send it in for a new report and it's been reported stolen, they're not going to get it back. Hopefully the owner will. The labs have actually been able to return lost diamonds to owners that way. So put the laboratory on your call list should something happen. And the other thing, and this relates to the modern age, and sort of as we get towards the end of this session, especially those of you who are buying, and what Dave said is gold, the closer you are to the source, the more recent the report, the more recent the document, the better you're going to know what it is. With that said, there was a little town in Wyoming, and a nice elderly lady walked into the local jewelry store, and she sold them over the counter her 3-carat colorless loop clean stone, and they paid her what they thought was a getaway price for them, and then they found out that she had substituted a lab-grown diamond for the diamond, the natural diamond that was on the report, and she made more than it was worth by about a factor of 5. So one thing that you can be aware of is that IGI does offer screening services, and we screen finished jewelry. So we're now having a good business from jewelers who do over-the-counter buying, who are making sure it's not that they don't trust who they're buying it from, but they also even want to have a new document that says what this is. So whether it's an appraiser capable of testing, there are decent testers now. Informal detection of lab grown is really not a substitute for formal grading, but it's absolutely better than nothing. If you're wanting to resell, and especially if you're buying something of value that's being stated a certain way, but that report is not new, then do be aware that the lab does offer consumer services, so that's available to you. I think we've got some questions, and one of them I see here actually talks about something that I had another note on. So real quickly, I'll tell you a story. Cartier made the news a little while back because there was a Maharaja named Bhupinder Singh, and he had a necklace made in the early 1900s by Cartier, and it was stolen from their royal treasury in India some 20 years later. Chains of the necklace were allegedly recovered in an antique shop in 1988, but of course the diamonds and rubies were all removed. and Cartier worked to restore the necklace as best they could with lab-grown gemstones. Well, this year, Emma Chamberlain wore that on the red carpet at the Met Gala, and it created quite a controversy because some people in the Indian community in particular criticized Cartier for permitting an influencer to wear what they consider a precious family heirloom. The other side of the story says that the replica is just that. It's not even necessarily guaranteed that the chains are from the original piece. So, by the way, it wasn't the FBI and it wasn't the police that outed this thing that happened on the red carpet. It was TikTok and Instagram. So interesting how everything now these days, there's really nothing hidden anymore. And I see a question here that says there is an online backlash, what I just described. The 1920s necklace disappeared under mysterious circumstances in the 1940s. So Dave, how does such a thing happen? How can such a piece, especially since it had a 234 carat centerpiece, how could it be gone for so many years? What do you think happened there?
That stone's in somebody's treasure chest somewhere. It's probably not coming out. And now I imagine it would be really hard to take it out. I don't think it would end up in an auction right now. It'll be grabbed by some relative of the family. They'll make an announcement that they're going to withdraw it from the auction if somebody would claim it. But that's probably well hidden. I doubt that it, fell off the earth and went to the moon.
Right. Yeah, I agree. There's, some famous art that's been stolen. By the way, I would suspect that some of that stolen art may be displayed in somebody's house, and they're not going to talk about it. So, yeah, it's unfortunate when that happens, but I suspect that you're right about that. Another question here: how have sanctions on Russian diamonds affected the industry? Do sanctions like this affect the industry? And how quickly do the changes appear? How long can they last? Absolutely. It's, in fact, the industry is deeply engaged in trying to support the sanctions. And part of that, as I mentioned, there's difficulty because, do we say, I'm not saying do we, me, I'm just saying some of the questions that are being asked in a global sense are, okay, what about the diamonds that were already in Russia that were Indian sourced, but the Indian polishing companies, they bought them years ago, and we still have some backlog from the pandemic, and in some cases those polishers are isolating those, anything that they have that has an invoice, they're isolating them. In other cases that may not be happening, but the short answer to that question is, yeah, it really affects the industry, and we're working to do as much as we can to protect the end consumer from anything that they don't want to be associated with. I saw a comment, by the way, Carl in the chat said, flood the insurance in paperwork, in documents about what you have. And I absolutely endorse that. The more, the better. Finally, is there renewed interest among younger buyers in where a diamond comes from? Okay, there's a quote here: older shoppers have traditionally been the growth engine of luxury sales. Millennials and Gen Z now make up 40% of all luxury spending. What's interesting is the renewed interest. Yeah, I think the renewed interest is actually because of lab-grown diamonds. I think it's shaken up the entire industry. Dave, I'd give you the last word on all that.
Yeah, I see lab diamonds coming on like gangbusters, but I don't see it ruining the mine diamond industry. That's going on pretty well, considering what is all happening in the U.S. I think the U.S. market's pretty strong, and it's amazing to me. There's lots of people that are out of the picture. There's plenty of the public that are too broke to have any thought of ever buying any kind of an important diamond. But there's enough people that are doing very well, and they're looking for luxury things, and diamonds continue to seem to have a very special place.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a big thought about lab grown that consumers would not see them as a store of value. But what's happened is, I think my parents saw diamonds as a store of value. I think the industry continues to see that. Not so sure Generation Z is looking through that lens. So, last question, final thought is, we have a question in the chat: with current sanctions against certain countries, will it possibly permanently change the way that the diamond industry traces rough diamond origin, regardless of where it winds up for cutting and polishing, maybe leveraging origin as a marketing opportunity? That's what started with Canadian diamonds. You know, they wanted to market themselves, especially during the unrest with conflict diamonds. They took the opportunity to market those diamonds and actually put a premium on them. Um, I believe that what we're going to see is greater demand for reporting the precise country of origin. I know that right now the miners are saying, well, we're just going to report that it comes from us. It's a De Beers diamond. I do think that there will be pressure, and I understand the concerns. Well, what if suddenly Namibia becomes super popular? You know what? We have to kind of let that sort it out. I just think consumers are going to put pressure for clear reporting. And, you know, working in the grading industry, if we know it, if it can be documented, then we will absolutely report it, like we're doing in sustainability for lab-grown diamonds. If there is a sustainability certificate from SCS or one of the other vetted and acknowledged sustainability solutions, then we'll report it. Dave?
Well, I could see that maybe, you know, this is in the hands of producers to some extent. Producers decide that their country has certain uh, uh, popularity level that they could improve, and they have a way of marking their stones coming from their source, and it catches on with the public. I can't, you know, it could, and I can't blame them for wanting to do it. We have seen lots of branded diamonds, though, that came and went. Stones that had no special purpose in the world. They were mostly round, brilliant stones cut with a series of extra facets on the pavilion primarily, that kind of cheated the cutting more than anything. He made them lumpy stones, heavy, thick, deep stones, and they called them brands. And those did not catch on all that well. And you know, maybe that's right, because they weren't all that special. So if somebody comes along and has a brand that has merit, or a country is doing something fantastic that catches the eye of the young consumer, and they say, we want to know that that stone came from there, I think they ought to give it a try. It might work for them.
Yeah, well, I got a lot of hot opinion there, and I can't say I disagree at all. I do think that everybody wants a story. I think that the diamond as a symbol of emotion is one thing. I think where you procure it from when you're choosing a seller, that's a very, very important component. You know, I think people like to buy from an organization that reflects their values, whether it comes to quality or philanthropy. And I think that there's a story beyond the seller that goes farther upstream. We're only going to improve the industry if we can give further reporting. And I guess the good news is it seems like that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. We are right up against 1 hour now, and really appreciate your kind time and attention. If you have any further questions, then by all means, don't hesitate to send them in. And if you are not already a member of PriceScope, please, by all means, come join the community, and you will find in the written word that you can have dialogue like this every single day with a collection of enthusiasts and professionals who care about diamonds, gemstones, and jewelry every bit as much as you do. So, thank you very much. Till next time, we'll see you.
Thank you.